Welcome to episode 195 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and this show is all about taking a deep dive with the leaders of the credit union movement that make it so great. This episode is brought to you by Velera, formerly PSCU Co-op Solutions, the nation's premier payments credit union service organization and an integrated financial technology solutions provider. Velera serves more than 4,000 financial institutions throughout North America, operating with velocity to help its clients keep pace with the rapid momentum of change and fuel growth in a new era of financial services. They also have a longtime partner and supporter of this show, so we thank them. Check them out in the show notes. Today, I'm having a conversation with Michael Crowl. Michael is the president and CEO of University Federal Credit Union in Austin, Texas. We happen to actually go through DE together. We were just talking before we hit record. It's almost been 10 years, which is insane. So with that, let's just jump right in. Welcome to the show, Michael. So good to see you virtually.
Oh, it's fantastic to reconnect. I mean, it's been, like you said, 9 years since we last connected, and we can't do that again. We got to make sure we shorten that time frame. But thank you for having me on. It's wonderful to be here.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like I said, it's mind-boggling that it's been that long. But for those who don't know you, let's start with a little bit of background. Where did your career start, and how did that lead you to where you are today as the CEO at university?
Well, like I think a lot of us, right, we kind of find our way to credit unions through a non-traditional path oftentimes, unless we had a family member who perhaps worked for a credit union, and for me, I spent the first, decade of my career in the for-profit world. So as an investment banker, and then I worked for a tech startup here in Austin, Texas. And I got to a point where I realized I wasn't happy, frankly. I was, that grind of working 7 days a week and late nights. And at some point, I'm like, this is not the life I thought I was going to live. And so took a step back and actually went and fulfilled a lifetime dream, or like a childhood dream I had, which was to become a coach and a teacher at a local high school. And so a very non-traditional path. And
that's a big shift from the investment world, eh?
It was quite the wake-up call. That's for sure for me. And I think the other part is first year I tell people I was a terrible teacher, because I was just kind of was in the classroom. I didn't know what I was doing. And year two, I want to say I was better. I think I was better. I think my students would agree too. Boy, it was for me, it was a great time to reconnect with the heart of coaching, leading, things that really weren't talked about in investment banking or in tech startups, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And after doing that for a couple of years, I was missing the professional world, and I found myself in the place where I was trying to figure out, how do I explain the story that, this for-profit world, now you're a teacher and a coach, and you want to do what? And so actually there was a job posting for a senior financial analyst at UFCU. It was a role I knew I could do, and I had a chance to interview with now retired CFO, Young Tran, and I was prepared. I'd analyzed the financials. I was ready to go. I was used to being kind of grilled on during these interviews.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the numbers at all.
You're like, what is this?
You wanted to know about coaching, teaching, who I was as a person. I loved it, but I was also I walked out thinking that was really weird. I've never had that before. Thankfully, got a second interview, and here I am. And I thought I'd be here for a few years, and boy, I fell in love with the place, and kind of realized that, oh my gosh, at the time I can do all kind of the cool finance things I like to do, but I can do it for impact and have a positive meaning and work with people I like, and I can have work-life balance. And I call me naive, but I had no idea that this whole world existed, and now I wouldn't have it any other way.
I know I've mentioned it on the show before, but I spent my first decade out of college at Morgan Stanley. And I remember 7, 8 years in, just in the shower, washing my hair going, I don't want to do this for another 30 years, or something. I was just like, what could I do? And stumbled into credit unions myself down, a few years later, right?
That's cool.
I feel your story. Can you share some key milestones in your leadership journey? It sounds like, you were a coach, right? That was something that was obviously inside you to make that transition. But when you think of that, the journey that you've been on, and specifically your leadership journey, and how they've shaped the style of a leader that you are today?
Sure. There's so many influences on my leadership, like a lot of us, right? None of us are going to get here without many others contributing along the way. And I think for me, it started, frankly, at home with my really learning from my mother and my grandmother. They were great role models for me. And I think it starts there. They were both, direct, open, loving, caring people, but you always knew where you stood with them but you knew you were cared for, right? And I think, coaches over the years and teachers, and I think a lot of that that kind of early formation molded who I am today about just being open and curious and supportive of others, but also, being direct when needed, and so that there's no, clarity and transparency. And I think my journey, I'd say my leadership journey really took off though when I joined UFCU. I was very, very fortunate to have several people here who, would pull me aside and offer me feedback. An opportunity at the time, he's now retired, Tony Boudet, our CEO. Early on, I had an opportunity. There was a mentoring program, and I was selected Tony mentored me early in my tenure here. It was pretty phenomenal. Like you mentioned, Young Tran and others along the way, but a lot of investment. As you know, leadership, it's really a journey of into oneself, right? In order to lead others well, you got to lead oneself well. And that for me was being intellectually curious was good for me to go into and explore. And boy, I think, again, I'm a different person today because of my work here at UFCU.
You said the word curiosity. I've found almost 200 episodes into this podcast now that CEOs are a group of curious people, right? Like it's that constant learning, and that's something that seems to be there from early on. And we've talked a lot about just like having that attribute as they're looking at future leaders in the organization. So my guess is when you came on board, people were like, saw your curiosity and said, hey, we can invest in this guy, right? So let's talk a little bit about credit unions. I like to get the challenges out of the way first.
Yeah, thank you
we
for
can
that.
just go to all the unicorns and rainbows. I mean, when you think of credit unions, whether it's at university or whether it's looking at the movement as a whole, what are the biggest challenges that you see us facing out there?
I'm not going to I guess I'll list them, but I'm not going to really expand on them. I think, of course, there's the more immediate challenges, right, that I think we've all faced with liquidity, kind of post-pandemic world, return to work, shifting labor force expectations there. I think, again, we're all facing, those things, right? Interest rates, obviously moving up, now moving down. But if I step back, frankly, I think the thing that's been in motion now and that the pandemic accelerated, frankly, was, we talk a lot about being relevant. I hear that terminology a lot, right? And how do we remain relevant? I think borrowing from a fellow CEO who he and I were in conversation is really how do we ensure that we're compelling, right? That, to me, not just relevant. I don't want to be just relevant. It's kind of like saying, I'm okay just being in the game.
Right. I'd like to be average.
Right. Yeah. Like I'm okay. No, we want to be the best, the best option for those who we serve, right? Or whom we serve. And so for us, and I think, the days of obviously the changes with the technology transformation, there's so much change happening, right? And that we've got to be relevant, whether it's the in-person experience, it's over the phone, which is where most of it traditionally have operated well. And as you all, and your guests have said, it's about the digital piece too. And it's not meant to replace. And it's not, to me, not a channel to lower cost. It's really how do we engage members and meet them where they are 24/7, 365.
So let me ask you this. As you were talking, you could probably see like a light bulb going off, and this is a complete rabbit hole here, but you were 100% right. We keep hearing the word relevant over and over and over about staying relevant. I like that idea of staying compelling. It's like, whoever said that before you pass it on to me. I'm probably going to steal that too. But to stay compelling, you mentioned how fast technology is changing. There's this idea, I think, with credit unions that we have to balance innovation while also maintaining that kind of personalized community, service that we're known for over our histories. And then I was going to get to this further down the road, but your background's in finance. You're the CFO before, so you know the numbers as well. How do you it's not like there's unlimited budget there, right? So how do you make sure that you're making those investments, that you're keeping up with innovation, and yet you're making the right decisions because you don't have unlimited resources, right?
Yeah, I think as you know, right, too, that you're never going to make all the right decisions unless you're just playing extremely safe, which means in the long term, you're actually not making the right decisions. So I think it's one of those things that it's kind of forced upon us, but I'm fortunate, and we're fortunate at UFCU in that, the long lineage of kind of a progressive, forward-thinking organization, frankly. We were the first in market many times with things, whether they were ATMs or the debit card or paying what a lot of these fintechs today are talking about, how get your paycheck 2 days early. we've been doing that for over 2 decades.
Right.
And
Okay.
we said, things like that, right? And so I think for us, where we started this journey, as a CFO, you think, what in the world does a CFO know about any of this, right? But I think I was fortunate again to have some opportunity where my role as CFO expanded to include digital and payments and ATMs, and it was an area of interest for me. And so I engaged heavily with fintechs and understood that marketplace. And so we brought in human-centered design thinking into the organization in 2016 and started to experiment small, right? So the whole thing about how do you start small, kind of fail, and more importantly, learn quickly without putting a lot on stake. And so we've done some really cool things here. We've got agile development happening throughout the organization. We actually have a role now that is an executive role that is fully dedicated to insights and innovation. That is her full-time role. And she is helping, again, glean insights from across the organization, from outside the organization, from our membership. And then how do we then use those insights to find areas of innovation and be able to move quickly? And so partnering with fintechs, for example, and spinning up pilots, instead of things more quickly. So a lot of experimentation.
I love that you bring that up, because I think all too often some of the organizations in our space think that if you're going to roll it out, it has to be perfect and we have to roll it out to everybody instead of kind of testing smaller, you know what I mean? And like you said, and it's not going to be perfect, and you learn from it. Yeah, I could talk for hours with you on that one alone, but we'll keep it moving. So let's talk about what has you excited, not only at the credit union, obviously at UFCU, but also when you look out at credit unions. What's the opportunity? What has you excited that we can do well? What makes us, use your word, compelling?
Yeah. I think for me, we do have the opportunity to have a compelling value proposition, right? Because we are the original social purpose oriented organizations, right? We were formed for a very specific purpose, right? And given the tax exemption to benefit the members and the communities we serve. So what credit unions do is we are authentic in our purpose, right? And nobody can claim that, and I think for us, what we've got to do also, in addition to that, right, is continue to meet our members' needs. And so that's where I go back to, evolving the branches and how those interactions in the branches, how those flow, and thinking about how we use technology over the phone in the back office. And then, of course, how we digitally engaging our members too, right? Not just a digital service channel, but a true engagement channel, right? And doing so in a way that I say is authentic and is connected to each of our individual brands, and so to me, it's I see that happening in the industries. There's a lot of, I think we're probably in the first inning, but I see progress and there's talk. And more as I go out and talk to other CEOs, I'm hearing a lot of discussion about transformation and realizing how much that transformation really is, that the heart of every digital transformation is cultural transformation. That's the key. It's actually not about the technology. Of course, the technology is important, right? But it's really about the it's about the cultural evolution, empowering your people, upskilling and reskilling them, and then giving them the guardrails and the framework and turning them loose.
It's funny you say that. That's one of those, I don't know if you want to call it a pet peeve or something, but that idea where you said it's not about the technology, I couldn't agree with you more, because many of the times, by the time we implement the technology, it's kind of table stakes. Like we're used to it with Amazon or whoever else we're, other places we're dealing with. So it's not like, woo, so, but yeah, that's really interesting. Got a couple of different directions I want to go there, but I do want to ask you kind of, before I just gloss over it, because I think it's so important for some of the listeners out there to hear about. I like to talk about mentors on the show, whether it's mentors you had or being a mentor. Now that you're in the chair, right? You mentioned a mentorship program at the credit union. You happened to get paired up with the previous CEO. How has mentoring been, I guess, impacted your career? And how are you paying that forward? I guess I would ask you at this point in time also.
I think for me, I think I mentioned it earlier too about no one gets to this role, obviously, without others, nor do they stay there without them.
Yeah.
Right? So I think early in my career, I thought of myself kind of as a one-man show in a way. And
that might be that competitiveness from the investment business, right? Like you were chasing a number, and that was
pretty much, it is it, right? Yeah, you're kind of on an island in a way, right? Which is great when it's good, but when there's storms, not so good, right? And I think mentors have made all the difference for me, right? I think I wouldn't be where I am now. And so, I mentioned Tony earlier, predecessor, and even his predecessor, Burton Eubanks, who I had a chance to meet, many years ago and had a relationship with. He invested himself when he heard I became president, so not yet CEO.
Right.
He reached out and was sharing kind of his insights and wisdom, and we were calling one another. It was pretty special.
That's amazing.
He's kind of legendary around here, right? So for me to have that time with him, and I think about a couple of recently retired executives here. Lori Roberts was another one, our chief lending officer. A lot of one-on-ones in either of our offices, like, okay, Michael, and I got some feedback to share, like, okay, or Lori, I got some feedback to share as well, right? And learning through that, or Mike Clifford, who recently retired. He was the former CIO of Whole Foods, and talking about experiences that he had at these large corporations and perspectives. And, these folks become your friends over time too, right? Where they really can speak kind of plainly and straight to you and give you the truth. Sometimes you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it.
Let me ask you about that, because you hear it mentioned all the time, this idea of like open door policy. And how do you create that culture where, it sounds like people felt, to tell you the good and the bad, right? Like, and I can tell you just from my personal experience, you need those people in the corner who speak truth. Those are, to me, definite allies. Like, what do you think of this? And everybody's just, that's great. I find a lot of value in the person who's like, what are you thinking? Tell me more. Like that. So
yeah. Like, I've got a lot of great ideas. Most of them are not great.
Right.
So,
they're not all going to be.
Like, no, Michael, no, that's not going to work. So I totally agree. I think for me, not only is it kind of expected, I think in our UFCU, people wanted to, but right, there's this whole spirit of, I think we recognize that we've been invested in, organizationally or by other people here. And so there's this natural kind of inclination to want to share, right, and give back. And so one, I think I've got a heart of a coach in me, as I mentioned earlier, having been, an athlete, even into college, I was an athlete and those things. And so I think a lot of this really starts with my executive team too. How am I mentoring and helping the executive team along the way? Many of who have aspirations of becoming CEOs themselves.
Your coaching tree, right?
Yeah. So I realized for me, I've got to play an active role in their development, and so it's not just my direct reports, right? And so I do, but folks know that in the organization that, I've been here 19 years. So there's part of it. A lot of the folks know me, right? But I think they're knowing me, you in a different way when you're the CEO. A big part of our workforce hasn't been here more than 5 years, so they don't know me that long. And one of the things I did early on in my tenure at CEO was I did a listening tour throughout the organization where I had 29 meetings over about 3 months with small groups and tried to get to every single employee in the organization, where we just shared more about who I was as a person and then just opened up the floor for questions. And it really, to me, was a great way to connect in a small group way. And I've always tell employees, if you got anything to share and you want to stop by for a coffee or a tea or go to lunch or breakfast, and do it. And so what's really cool is employees do that.
Yeah.
They actually take me up on it, which I love that. It's one of the best parts of my job, frankly. And one of the things I also do is that monthly I'm sure others do this too, is a lunch with employees. So there's a CEO lunch every month where people put their names in for interest in it. And then there's a waiting list for several months, and probably about a year almost worth of a waiting list to get into that group. And about 5 or 6 of us go to lunch, connect. And it's kind of more of a personal social thing, but I do tell them, hey, look, you've got the CEO here.
Yep. You got my ear, right?
You want, right? So I think a lot of it's been just being, obviously I respect the role of CEO, but I'm just another person. And I tell people that I'm just another person. My opinions don't count any more than yours do. But I do have a different level of kind of responsibility and authority in the organization, right? Which I understand that. I respect it. But again, I'm just a person too.
I've got 2 questions on this. One is kind of going back to let's call it the coaching tree, because we'll know what we're talking about here. But when you're looking out there, if somebody's listening today and they're like, you know what, someday I'd like to be a CEO, or I'd like to be a senior leader in my credit union or a credit union. Is there something that you see? Maybe you're at one of these lunches, or when you're talking to people, when you're on your listening tour or something like that. Is there like a kind of like an executive presence or something like a trait that you see in somebody, or that you're like, ooh, we got to keep an eye on them. They might have big things ahead of them.
Yeah. I think for me, when I hear executive presence, sometimes that is one of those words I think that sometimes people kind of demystify that, right? Because I think some people hear that and say, well, I don't know what that is. And so how can I be an executive? I don't know what it is. And it's one of those things it's kind of vague. And I just share that not because I'm being critical of what you characterize, but more just about how I think about things. What I look for is that curiosity oftentimes is, as you're meeting people, what are the questions they're asking you? And is there a strong interest in that? Are they Also is there self-awareness too, though, that makes sure that they're not dominating the floor, so to speak, right? If it's a small group that, they're creating space for others to, share their voice and perspectives. Do you sense some authenticity there? There's some level of authenticity or transparency that's coming through, right? In a way that's not, and their questions aren't necessarily about, sometimes it's appropriate, of course, but about themselves. But again, are they doing this in a place that's looking for the betterment of themselves, the team, the others, the organization, right? Not just to advance oneself. Usually you can see through those things over time. And I think for me, it's authenticity is one of my core values. And so something I'm always looking for. And then of course, I think they've got to be, I don't have as much insight into this, I'd say, but obviously we've all got to be really good at whatever it is we do, like whatever role we're in today, right? I call it mastering your craft, that make sure you master the craft you're in today, no matter what role you want to have down the road, and do exceptionally well because it brings forth opportunity for you.
So the other thing that I wanted to touch on, so I'm going to jump back a little bit here, but you saying, like you want people to share their ideas, thoughts, that you're just another person. You're just another person that kind of has the final say. One of the things we've talked about on the show before, but when talking to friends, maybe as they get their first CEO gig in our space or something of that nature, where it's like, we've all heard that kind of analogy that you're kind of the bottleneck part of an hourglass, right? So that idea that like when you have that trust in the relationship where people feel free to express themselves to you or tell you what their ideas are, there's going to come points and times where you're like, I heard you, but this is what we're doing. Anything you've picked up over time, I guess, and this could be going up to your board to get everybody on board with the direction, the mission you're laid out to fulfill, but also making sure that like all the way through the organization and your team down to the person who's talking to the member each day, like that everybody is getting the buy-in to know why the credit union is doing what it's doing and how that fulfills the mission to do that. Hacks, things you can share.
There's a lot there. Let's see try to unpack a bit for myself. One of the things I committed to the organization when I became CEO was transparency and clarity. And I keep going back to that, right? And so whether it's in a town hall meeting or whatever format it may be, is certainly want to hear what employees are thinking, feeling, and I want them to be able to share openly, right? And to know that's being received in a place where, and oftentimes they will change my perspective on something or my point of view, which is, I love that, right? That's how you continually learn. And
you learn, right?
And so I think creating that space and safe space for people to, again, share the feedback, share concerns, positive, negative, however you want to view it, that we're getting the feedback. But then telling them, if it's something that we're going to go do, then great. Thank you for the idea. That's fantastic. And we're already doing it or we should go do that. We'll make sure that feedback gets acted upon. There's some things that are just clearly we're not going to do. And I just tell people that. So it's one of those things that the first time I did it, I was a little bit scared. I was just going to go over. An employee was asking about some potential benefit. And I just told them that we're not going to do it. And I told them why.
Yep.
What I heard was, I may not like the answer, but I really appreciate you telling me why.
At least they have the answer, and it wasn't like, let us look into that, even though you knew it wasn't going anywhere, right?
Rarely do they hear me say, we'll look into it, right? It's more of yes, no, or something I just don't know about, which is plenty in the organization. I will get somebody who does, but I make sure the feedback gets followed up on. But no, I think for me, that's been a real powerful tool. And I think employees, have come to understand that they're going to hear the straight truth from me in a clear and transparent way, and not holding back. And I think they've responded really well to it.
That's pretty cool. Is there an investment that you've made in your career that when you look back on, you're like, yep, that was a good one. I wouldn't be where I was today. I use the example that Warren Buffett said it was Dale Carnegie courses, right?
Right. So. For me, I was very, very fortunate in that. Well, I also need a lot of help. So I've had a lot of executive coaching over the year, as you can imagine. But gosh, this is may have been right around the time we met, frankly, or right before that. I went through a 24-week executive coaching program.
Oh.
It was 8 to 10 hours a week of work. So reading assignments, various exercises. I had to journal. I had to write a report every week and submit it to my coach. And then we'd meet on Fridays, and I would share over like a 90-minute, 2-hour phone call it was pretty challenging at the beginning because he wanted to get deep, right? He wanted to know, who is Michael Crowl?
Yeah.
And I didn't want him to know who Michael Crowl was. I'm not sure I knew who Michael Crowl was, right?
You were still trying to figure that out yourself, right?
Yeah, right. Like,
we were younger then.
Whoa, where are you going here? I was resistant, but I gave in. I trusted him. And I tell you what, it was transformational in a lot of ways. And just in terms of really deeply getting to know myself. Part of this exercise was, in the first few weeks, I had to list my values, and I listed 5 values. And then near the end of the program, you do it again.
Oh.
He really challenged what I had written down. And I was like, yeah. And he did not let me off the hook. And so that was when I developed my 5 values. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And now I knew and I don't always live into them, right? None of us do, right? Flawed human beings, but I know what I'm aspiring to be and how to show up. And so, I'd say that was a transformational time for me, that I would not be the leader and really, frankly, the person I am today without that program.
It's interesting when Jill left the league and was starting Humanity, that was an exercise that she was doing a lot of, and something she's worked into what they do there as well. And I remember, I think I was one of her guinea pigs just at home on that. And it was such a fascinating thing. And I'm sure I feel like it's what you were saying, but you're not always living them. But if you know them, you can tell when you veered off and you're like, well, this is the reason this doesn't feel good. It doesn't fit. Like for me, it can be for somebody else, right?
No,
but
very true.
That's a good way to learn yourself. It sounds like an awesome coaching program also. I mean, intense, but
it was. It was a big investment on behalf of the company to send me through that program. And so one thing that I like to ask people is, they're looking for mentoring or those things too. I do ask, well, what are your values? And sometimes they tell you, and sometimes they have to think about them and say, well, you need to spend time on this. So I said, if I'm happy to be a thought partner with you in this, and if you want to bounce ideas, here I am.
I absolutely love that. What do you think today, 2024? You and I were similar age. We grew up probably reading the same business books. You know what I mean? Like some have aged well, some haven't. In 2024, we're almost towards the end of the year. What makes a good CEO or a leader in general today?
Oh gosh, there's a lot there. I don't know. Like, why are you asking me? What do I know? I'm not sure I'm a good CEO, but I'm trying to be one. Yeah. I think the reality is, I'm trying to get past the cliches here, right?
I understand.
A lot of characteristics, what I'd say is I think the most important, frankly, or one of the most important, is to truly care about people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's got to be in you, right? I mean, you got to care about people because, processes matter, technology matters, systems, all those things, right? But at the end of the day, it's all about people, right? And it's going to be people who are executing upon them, right? And so I say that people starting there. I'll tell you what, one of the best sources of research I've come across was a McKinsey book called CEO Excellence. I found it when I was, before I interviewed for the CEO role. The board did a national search, competitive process, and as they should have, and I'm glad they did. At the time, of course, you don't want them to do that.
You're like, hey, I'm right here.
Give me the job, but going through it, I'm like, no, I'm glad I did it because it really helped me kind of refine my thinking about what I wanted the organization, my vision for the organization. But in that book, it talks about there's 6 kind of elements to the role of a CEO. And it's all research-based, fact-based, and engaging the board, engaging external stakeholders, creating a differentiated strategy, aligning the organization, mobilizing leaders, and managing oneself. So that's all. Just those 6 things. If you just do that wonderfully, then you'll be a great CEO. But what I like about it, though, too, is they kind of give you a spectrum. They give you here's kind of an elemental level of it, and then here's more of a advanced leader in these areas. So you can really, for me, I go back to that table all the time, and I look at it and say, okay, Michael, where am I operating at this time in each of those dimensions to say, okay, where do you need to lean in? What does it look like? So at least I've got a guide to help me. And I've been very fortunate too. I'm part of a group with Callahan and Associates that I'm part of an inaugural CEO Excellence cohort where 7 fairly newly minted CEOs are going through this program together. And this is actually the book, which I'd found beforehand. So when I saw this was going to be the curriculum, I'm like, hey, I recognize.
Hey, I read that.
It's been great to walk through that book. We meet in person twice a year, and we usually go through kind of a chunk at a time. And of course, we start in place, and you can imagine with 7 CEOs in a room, conversations flow quite a bit, meander.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll link to that in the show notes as well if people want to check out that book. So one thing, and you kind of mentioned it just in there as well, but I always like to ask this question. And again, I kind of think back to when some of my friends became CEOs, right? Like it's different than being the CFO or the CXO or, someone else. And often it was that idea that you go from kind of having one boss to having 9, 10, 11. Is there anything now that you've been in the role for some time that you would tell a new CEO when it comes to having a good relationship with your board?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. First and foremost, get to know the board members outside the boardroom, right? One-on-one. Right. It is so easy for us, I believe, because we all come from some specialty, right? Whether it's finance or lending or marketing or somewhere in the business, right? And you tend to first have to learn to grow beyond that role, and then it's so easy to get pulled into the operations of the organization.
Yeah, right.
And those pieces, and so it's easy to say, well, yeah, I'll get together with them one-on-one, and you look back a year later and you haven't done it at all. And so it's really, engaging with that board. Understanding what a good board experience means to each of them individually, because they're all there for different reasons, for whatever it may be, right? I mean, there's a core common reason that they're there for the organization, but there's other things they're looking to get out of it, right? There's a return to them too, right? In terms of the time they're spending and giving to the organization, they also want to get something from it, right? They want to feel good about the work they're doing. And so understanding kind of uniquely those areas of interest and their why, to me, is something that I'm continually thinking about. I think, again, it's an area that you cannot underinvest in.
Okay. I want to be respectful of your time. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with some rapid fire questions. It wouldn't be the CUInsight Experience without them. First job you ever had?
Official job, if you call it that, was mowing lawns with a lawn mowing company between my 8th and 9th grade years in school.
There you go. Is there anything that you're currently working on that's taken up the Michael personal growth space?
We're all work in progress, right? I think the biggest thing, frankly, for me is my wife and I are transitioning to life as empty nesters.
Ah, okay.
That's a big one for both of us.
You're just trying to figure out what that looks like, right?
A little over a month into it, I'm telling you. So it's
well, I think it's congratulations, but I'm sure that's an experience, right? So obviously, wife, kids, anything that you've lived and learned along the way to create that, I don't like to use the word balance, but you know what I mean? Like whole human here, that often on the path to the CEO chair and becoming the CEO, it can take up some space.
Oh, yeah.
So what would you tell people to help it try to all work out?
I think something that was shared with me a while back was just how important energy management is, like our own personal energy.
I like that term.
And that, really, if you want to call it a hack or not, is giving yourself permission to say no. Because as CEO, right, or an executive in an organization, you can endless invitations to a variety of things inside and outside the organization. And it's just learning to say, I'm going to say no to this. I've had to get okay with it. I think I'm fully okay all the time with it, but I'm getting better at it. I always think about, again, what's my energy level look like? I've been traveling a considerable amount.
Yeah.
You come back and then you've got 3 nights of things in a row, let's say during a week. You're not setting yourself up for long-term success. Right.
Right. So, I like that.
We often know, again, in our role, if we make, a bad decision, sometimes it can be detrimental to the organization for a long time to come.
Absolutely. Every time someone's around my age, I always look forward to asking this question. So what's the greatest album of all time? That one you can still listen to from front to back.
U2's Joshua Tree.
That's a good one. There we go. This is my Chairman Harper question, and it has nothing to do with compliance. Who plays you in the movie biopic of your life? Oh, yeah. Wow. Well, I think you just pick up some average guy off the street, and I think that'd probably just fine, frankly. There'd be a lot of similarities. But if not, you could have, this might be kind of fun. You could have I'm thinking here we are, I'm in Austin, Texas, right? And so, right. Oh, all right. Matthew McConaughey. I like it. I think that'd probably be the one. Yeah, he could come audition for the role. There you go. I like it. Anything you're currently reading? We'll link to the book you talked about, before in the show notes. Or is there it could be that one, but a book that you just think everybody should read?
think I've got about 5 books I'm into right now. Yeah, partially through, but one book I'd recommend because one, it's such a simple construct, is called Leadership and Self-Deception.
Okay, I've not heard of that one.
It is really good about leading oneself, and it talks about it's from the Arbinger Institute, and they've got they've got 3 books, but I think this was the first one, and it's a fantastic book about basically, are you looking inward or outward, and are you putting others in a box, right? And so it's in terms of how you're thinking about things. So it's a great reframe.
Dude, just added to my reading list, that's for sure. Last question. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share or asks of our listeners today? This is so much fun. I'm more worried about time than anything.
No.
These are my favorite podcasts.
This is fun. We've got to go on for another several hours.
Absolutely, right?
First of all, appreciate the time you carved out for me and allowing me this opportunity. And for those in the audience who are having to suffer through this podcast on my behalf, you ask great questions. You're so good at this, by the way. And I mean that sincerely, right? I listen to a lot.
I appreciate that.
Your energy's coming through. But yeah, one thing I like to say to people oftentimes, the question I would ask of them is, whose life are they going to make a difference in today? It's a great way to start the day, right? And so whenever you're listening, sometimes I listen to a podcast on the way in. So I would challenge them to ask themselves that question every day.
Well, that is the perfect question to wrap up the show on. We will link to everything we talked about today in the show notes. Michael, great to reconnect. Thank you for being here today. Like you said, we can't go another 9 years. That's insane.
I hope not.
Thanks for being here. And I can't wait for our paths to cross again, hopefully soon.
A few things before we go. Please make sure to check out our sponsor, Velera, in the show notes. Velera is the nation's premier payments credit union service organization and financial technology solutions provider. They're also a longtime supporter of the show and allowing me to have this much fun doing what I do. So please stop by and check them out.
Please also subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all. And if you're looking for a book mention, like a few of the ones that Michael mentioned today, you can Google the CUInsight Experience podcast book list, and your next read can be on its way from Amazon or Audible, whatever you choose. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you for listening. Y'all rock. I appreciate each and every one of you. Be well, friends.